Tinubu is set to defend the 2024 budget tomorrow to the National Assembly, as we have seen that FEC have approved the 27 trillion naira for the 2024 budget. The program is the Dailies on Echo Television, where we keep you updated with all the happenings on the Nigerian newspaper. I am Sada Elisha Dasham, and I'll be doing the program together with Rachel Tanzi. Good morning, Rachel.
Morning, Sada.
All right, to our viewers and supporters at home, do well to follow us live on Facebook and on YouTube, and then you can do well to also drop your comment on any of the story that is of interest to you this morning. And we'll go straight into the papers, starting with the Voice of Liberty. And the big story on the Voice of Liberty: I will crush petrol price, eliminate hardship, Tinubu promises. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has vowed to find a lasting solution to the tough times facing Nigerians, saying that he was quite aware of the myriad of social, economic, and political problems Nigerians are grappling with. Yesterday, we will recall he's actually planning to crash the price of gas, and today he's saying he's going to crash petrol price. So you can keep your fingers crossed and read more detail of any of the story in the paper. FEC approves 27 trillion naira as 2024 budget. 5.6 billion naira with project scam. Ex-Nasser boss arrested 11 months after sacking. You can find detail of it in the paper. Tinubu appoint NNPCL board members. Food beverages manufacturers, producers grown over 34% on sold inventory. More detail in the paper. And on Lagos demolitions, Ohanize urges Igbos to relocate investment to the southeast. And on digital switchover, federal government to unveil comprehensive blueprint of rollout. This is coming from the minister. You can find detail of the story in the paper, and that's all on the Voice of Liberty.
On Daily Independent, citizens' confidence in judiciary, best way to measure success of judicial institutions. Statement coming from the CJ and AGF tax NJC on appointment of Supreme Court justices. Edo Deputy Governor declares Guba bid, says no one can stop him. You can start with the details on the front page. The big story on the paper revealed how dispatch error landed Abuja-bound flight in Asaba. NCAA suspends West leased aircraft in United Nigeria. Aviation regulators action in order, says expert. Protest rocks Kano over appeal court judgment on Guba election. Details can be found on page 29. Government to install 3.23 billion naira explosive narcotic detection devices in 5 airports. North Central Region bemoans Tinubu's treatment of zone. Tinubu reappointment carry as NNPCL CEO. More details can be found on page 7. Basic school enrollment in Nigeria hits 45 million. This is a report coming from UPEC, and I believe this is progress in our educational system. You can find details on page 6. Federal government raises 2024 budget to 27.5 trillion naira, presents it to the National Assembly. This actually means that then the borrowing will be more than 7.8 trillion naira then. Now the right under the story says reviews exchange rate to 750 naira to a dollar, PEX oil benchmark at $77 per barrel. Looks to get budget support loan of $1 billion from the African Development Bank, and then to increase tax revenue to GDP ratio to 18%. You can start with the details of this story on the front page. Israel-Hamas truce in Gaza extended 2 days on the deal. More details can be found on page 6, and that's all the news on Daily Independent.
On Nigerian News Direct, PDP heads to Supreme Court to challenge Sanwo-Olu's victory. Detail found on page 7. Zenith Bank signed memorandum of understanding with French government to establish operations in France. Despite police ban, protests rock Kanu over the appeal court judgment, with detail on page 4. And the big story: FEC paying $77.96 crook benchmark, and then 750 naira to a dollar exchange rate for the 2024 appropriation bill. Approves $1 billion support loan from the African Development Bank. Tinubu to present the budget to National Assembly actually tomorrow, not today. You can find detail of that on page 2. Aviation Minister blames poor regulatory oversight for frequent air accident meets with head of agency. And on Edo 2024, I have been pressed but not crushed, persecuted but not abandoned. Edo Deputy Governor Shaibu will record that yesterday he made his intention known to run for the governorship election. You can find detail of that story on page 2. And we have two picture story on the front page of the paper. You can do well to grab the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On First News newspaper, Edo 2024 global race, nobody can stop my ambition, says Shaibu, makes formal declaration. The big story on the paper, in Ondo, Tinubu's intervention suffers setback as plot to declare Ayedatiwa acting governor Tikins. State Assembly may declare Deputy Governor acting governor today, and we have Akeredolo's calm moves to frustrate plan. President Tinubu to present 2024 budget Wednesday to the National Assembly. Judiciary won't replace law with mobs' emotions, says the Chief Justice of Nigeria. Governor Abiodun approved constituency projects for 236 councillors. 19 years after my varsity not yet standing, Atiku laments. I'm disappointed in myself, Biden apologizes over Gaza war. Reps probe mismanagement of COVID-19 funds, and on flight diversion, NCAA sanctions United Nigeria. Tinubu reappoints Melekari as NNPC LG CEO, and how to avoid financial losses and ATM fraud. This is coming from the EFCC, and I believe everybody should get the First News newspaper and find the details how to avoid financial losses and then ATM fraud. We have seen so many reports coming from banks and how much people, the billions of naira that have been lost last year down to 2023, most especially when it comes to ATM fraud. Now we have picture story 1 showing the delegates from the Economic Community of West African States and the government of Nigeria, including Nigeria's National Security Advisor, Rubadu, Nigeria's Chief of Defense Staff General Christopher, and then Chief of Defense Military Intelligence Major General Emmanuel, and the President of the ECOWAS Commission, Dr. Omar, among others, after a solidarity visit to Sierra Leone. President Julius Bio in Freetown on Monday. Remember, there was an attempted coup in Sierra Leone, and that's all the news on First News newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at the Metrics newspaper. Tinubu appoints new board management team for the NMPCL. You can look at the full list of those appointments on the front page and more in the paper. And we have the Chief Justice of Nigeria gives the breakdown of cases handled by the Supreme Court in the outgone legal year. Charges judges to maintain integrity judiciary is known for. You can find detail in the paper. Inside President Tinubu's 27.5 trillion naira 2024 budget. Real reason FEC increased the budget estimate by 1.5 trillion naira emerges, why the FEC amended the exchange rate to 715 naira to a dollar instead of 700 naira to a dollar, and then the crude to 77.96 naira per barrel, and also federal government to fund the budget with $1 billion African Development Bank loan, $50 million Canada African Bank climate fraud. So you can find more of that on how the federal government intends to actually fund all of this budget, with detail found on page 2. NCAA suspend United Nigeria Airlines at Keyamo summon heads of aviation agency amid safety concern. Umahi accuses Buhari administration of 6 trillion naira debt. More detail found in the paper. And on global economy, whiskey value declines as consumer reduces demand, which is very, applaudable. A lot of people need to start taking things that are healthy rather than things that will harm them. Also, we are seeing Lagos to demolish houses built illegally in Aguyi, Asapa, others along Akuta. You can find more of the story in the paper. Jega charges Tinubu to review Rex appointment. You can find more detail of all of the story. We have the picture story here where we can see the group managing director, CEO of Zenith Bank, and others for the establishment of a subsidiary at France recently. And that is all on the Metrics newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, the big story, Tinubu presents budget Wednesday and FEC OK's $1 billion loan. Federal government targets 18 trillion naira revenue, raises exchange rate benchmark from $700 naira to a dollar to 750 naira to a dollar. Speaker, opposition lawmakers assure Nigerians of proper budget screening to grill ministers. I mean, Sele, I don't know what measures the federal government are using for these estimates of our revenue. We are yet to meet this 1.8 million barrel per day production of crude oil. And I mean, it's still up. So we know that when it comes to OPEC, I know it's in line, is ahead of OPEC Plus, that the federal government is trying to do everything it takes. However, the price of crude oil has been dwindling, and regardless, despite OPEC's trying to see that it went high, the most we got for 2023, despite cutting down supply from countries like Qatar, Saudi Arabia, all these major countries, we saw that the best OPEC could get for 2022 was $74 per barrel for crude oil. However, we have seen the federal government going from 16 trillion revenue, we are now going to 18 trillion exactly. And then we are now seeing 700 to a dollar, and then now going as high as 750. Now, what this automatically means is that for the federal government to predict that the dollar will fall rather than appreciate is already worrisome on another level, because we should be seeing a better exchange rate regardless, because we are seeing the forest crisis that we are having. So predicting a higher exchange rate at the official market is not even good enough as it is. And then when we are seeing that we are yet to meet our oil production quota, is also concerning for us now to increase our revenue to 18 trillion. But this is not even the major concern. It's the fact that we have a deficit of 9 trillion. And then there is going to be a burn of 7.8 trillion naira. Now, automatically, if we're going to 1.5 trillion, it means increase in the former proposed budget of 26.5. Now we are up to 27.5 exactly. So now it means that we have to borrow more. And now we are saying that we are now going to African Development Bank for $1 billion. And then we are also seeing that we are also going to Canada, yes, Canada African Bank. So I just truly hope that whatever measures the federal government is using to calculate, to estimate, that we wouldn't just do a budget that we are going to suffer it for financial year of 2024, because our revenue hasn't spiked up that much for us to even start estimating that we will be able to see this amount of revenue. So I just hope that it won't be at the detriment of borrowing and borrowing and borrowing, because if we are not able to meet this 18 trillion revenue, and we've already made a budget of 27.5 trillion naira, it means come what may, we have to borrow to make sure that our budget, because then it means somewhere and somewhere a parastatal is going to suffer, because if 300 billion was given to, let's say, the census population, and then we're not able to meet the target of this revenue, there is no how they can function on 200. So we have to borrow to make sure they get that 300 billion, for instance. So I just hope that we will be able to meet this 18 trillion naira revenue target. And then I just hope that truly perhaps the exchange rate stays like that, because if not, then it's just going to mean that our deficit by 2024 will be higher than what we have as it is now.
Well, Richard, right now, even though they have increased it, just like we said, from 26.5 to 27.5, and that was during the FEC meeting. So possibilities are the ministers, agencies met up and saw certain money that need to go to save various sectors. Now I'm waiting, just like the lawmakers have promised us, that they are going to be thorough to actually properly screen this budget. So I believe that Nigerians will be glued tomorrow to be sure that every penny, just like we're saying here, if we are envisioning the fact that we're going to be hitting a target of 18 trillion naira revenue, then that means every agency have to put the work to be able to realize this revenue, because this is not magic. Because if every ministry and agency will realize that we borrowed the money to give you so you'll be able to do the right thing, I think people will do the right thing, because you know that this is not your money. And then, just like we saw the minister complaining, I mean, the minister of finance complaining, we cannot keep borrowing to actually budget, to actually keep for our budget of 2024. And then we're looking at not just 2024, 2024 down to 2026. So I'm just hoping that with all of this thing, we'll be able to be smart and be wise. Every sector that have been given the various money, however the money is being allocated to them, they need to put the work, because we need to realize this revenue, because that's the only way we'll be able to pay off. I mean, paying 30% interest on this is really, really quite a lot of money, Rachel. So I hope that we are really wise about it. You've said actually more, so I cannot even say more. But I hope that we'll stop focusing on the oil alone. We need to start looking at other places, because from all of this thing, we are just having our entire hope and trust in the oil that will be able. It's no longer even just 1.8 million. We're now looking at 2 million barrels per day. So I don't know the magic. We're still tackling with the issue of oil theft and all of that. So I'm hoping the government know that this is quite a lot of work, and then the ministers will be able to do their right work, and they will see other department and agencies also doing their best as well.
Still on the Punch newspaper, on the lawmakers meet today may declare Ayedatiwa acting governor. Worker dies, 2 injured at Lagos construction site. Sean gets staff of office December 16 called halt removal. More details can be found on page 26. And then we have a picture story where we can see President swears in 8 permanent secretaries, presides over fake meeting. And that's all the news on the Punch newspaper.
All right, let's take a look at what the Guardian newspaper have for us. We have $1 trillion economy. Federal government proceed with unambitious budget, proposes 27.5 trillion naira next year. Now we're looking at the 2024 key estimate. We're having a deficit of 9 trillion naira, and then our inflation we have about 21.4%. Our economic growth is about 3.76%. Now, oil production is about 1.8 million barrels per day, which we are seeing the government is looking into 2 million barrels per day. Our oil price, they're looking at it, they have increased it from $75 to $77. And then the exchange rate, they have increased it from 700 naira to $1 to 750 naira to $1. Now, the 27.5 million budget translates to a per capita spending of about 127,000 or $150 now. Quite a number of things, and I just hope we've actually analyzed and tried to dissect this. So let's just wait and see what every sector will be getting when the president goes to defend it before the National Assembly. That will give Nigerians, a clearer picture of how the whole budget is, and then how the money has been allocated to various sectors as well. Still on the Guardian newspaper, we're seeing UPEC bemoans shortage of teachers, 100 million naira yearly funding. Well, not only are we having shortage of teachers in our primary and secondary school, we are having shortage of also lecturers in our tertiary institution. This is called for an emergency, and we hope the government will look into that as well. Despite warning protests in Kano over Court of Appeal ruling, you can find that story in the paper. And we're having the Chief Justice of Nigeria seek amendment of termination of most cases at the appeal court. LCCI flags inconsistency in federal government $1 trillion economic vision. MTEF, you can find that business news on page 15. The untreated relics of the hashtag NSAS protest 3 years after. This is an editorial which can be found on page 12. And also we're seeing that at the Guardian anniversary lecture book presentation today, stakeholders discuss federalism. More detail of that can be found on page 6, and that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Vanguard newspaper, banks ready for recapitalization, coming from CIBN. Judicial decisions can affect FDI, coming from the CBN governor. Federal government jags up 2024 budget to 27.5 trillion naira. Tinubu reappoint Melekari, Group CEO of NNPC Limited. More details can be found on page 13. Appeal court judgment, protest rocks parts of Kano. And on diversion, NCAA grants United Nigeria Airlines West List aircraft. You can find details on page 9. Appeal court sacks Kaduna speaker, orders rerun in 5 polling units. The big story on the paper, justice sees fight back. We can't replace law with emotions. A statement coming from the Chief Justice of Nigeria says justice won't be afraid of intimidation with independence. Scores third arm highly at rule of law in Nigeria, questionable since 1999. Discloses NJC ready to receive petitions against election tribunal judges. Swears in 58 new senior advocates of Nigeria, taxed them on professionalism and integrity. The Chief Justice of Nigeria confession of external influences troubling coming from Atiku's aid. Societies fall when public confidence in judiciary fails. A statement from Labour Party. CSOs fall the Chief Justice of Nigeria. Then we have the Attorney General of the Federation tax new sans on professionalism and others. Details of this statement can be found on page 5. ASU Konwa warns government against new varsities, says existing ones malnourished. Very true, and I hope that the federal government looks into this. More details can be found on page 9. FEC votes 3.23 billion naira for explosives and narcotics detection scanner in 5 airports. More details can be found on page 8. We have a picture story where we can see the Oba of Benin in Lagos, and also France-Nigeria Council meet in Lagos. And that's all the news on Vanguard newspaper.
I mean, we also even need to ask our lawmakers, why are they actually passing a bill for new universities in the first place? What is wrong with the ones we have presently? Have we taken care of it that we are? It breaks my heart. We spoke about that yesterday with you, Rachel, while we're discussing where we're seeing, talking about the fact that we're seeing on the papers we are running short of even teachers. Stop coming from the universal basic education complaining that there's shortage of teachers. And here also we are seeing the fact that even lecturers are crying and complaining there's shortage of lecturers because of the JAPA syndrome. The brain drain is not just in the medical sector, but it's also going around education, and in a matter of time we'll begin to see feel the effect, because it's happening all around. It's just the effect we're feeling presently, and then we're seeing our lawmakers passing a bill for 32 new universities. And we saw that looking at the federal university and equationing it with the private universities we're having more private universities than the federal university, and that is not supposed to be so in a country where we're supposed to be seeing the federal government taking the lead in everything. And we're seeing that more private universities are coming up every day. So we hope that the government will look into this. So we are seeing here that not only is ASU, but even Konwa is also complaining about it, because there was a time since there was a fraction between these two unions. But we're seeing that they are coming to an agreement, the fact that presently, right now, some of our universities, or most of our universities, are malnourished. And you can, when you say something is malnourished, you can actually look at it, looking at the welfare of our lecturers, looking at even the learning environment, and quite a number of things. And then we're seeing the tuition fee again is another thing. So we hope that our lawmakers will have a rethink about that bill that they are planning to pass, and that they'll look into the fact that we need to pay more attention to the ones we have. Let us upgrade the standard to it being to where, I mean, we can rub shoulders with other students studying abroad, and then you know that yes, you have the quality of education you're supposed to get, not where we have big like graduates coming out and then they cannot really match with other graduates of other universities. Quite sad. So I hope our government will look into this, and then we'll be able to do something about tertiary institutions to upgrade it.
I keep saying this, and I'll never stop saying it, that the Nigerian government knows exactly the solutions to the problems we have. However, they choose to keep beating around the bush. There's no how our lawmakers won't tell me that they do not know that what our educational system is an upgrade in the standard of tertiary university rather than building new ones. Because we need to be at a level before we think of expanding. Before you see a business open another branch, the first branch is perfectly well, and then there is a need for more branches. But we have the ones that are available, not functioning up to world-class standard, but you're more worried about building more schools that won't even be up to half of the standard of the one you've been having existing for many years. And then you wonder, are they not intelligent, or are they just beating around the bush rather than doing what is expected? Because I believe, Sele, if common men know the way forward, What about people with resources, with all the aids, the assistance, the information, the data that we don't have access to? Talk more of such people that have access to things like that. They know it. So rather than building more universities, I believe that we need to see our current existing university up to standard. Let's go back to the Nigeria that we had foreigners coming to school in Nigeria, coming to study medicine. We have African countries that we should be doing way better than them, that we should be having students from other countries coming, but yeah, we have our students going to Sudan. We have our students going to countries that we shouldn't even be close to them in any way when it comes to growth, education-wise, and every other kind of growth. And then secondly, there's a reason why it's called basic education. Rather than building more universities, our basic education is suffering. We saw how you beg are having an issue. How, for Christ's sake, Sele, will our basic education be having only 100 billion naira yearly funding? It already shows that there's a problem. It already shows that the federal government is not ready to sit up and fund education the way it should be, because there's a reason why it's called basic education. It's like a toddler growing up. Once they miss certain vitamins as babies, they grow up with one deficiency, one defect or the other. Is the reason why it's called basic education. Once peoples can find basic education, the rest becomes easy. Secondary education become easy, tertiary become easy. Why? Because the basic foundation was good, and this is one place we are lacking. So I'm looking forward to seeing the education minister saying more funding will be going to education. I am looking forward to seeing that UBEC is having more than 100 billion for its yearly funding for primary education in this country. And that is when I'll start believing that we have a government that knows where we're heading to, knows what needs to be funded, and are willing and ready to do the job to take education to the next level in this country.
I think Nigerians are not really concerned about the big money you keep mentioning on the paper. They want to see it being shown. I mean, let us see it in the classroom. Let us see it in the learning. We saw one of the learning environment, quote unquote, in FCT, and it beats my heart to say that learning was actually happening there. So when you mention quite a huge amount of money, Nigerians want to see the money. Let us see our teachers well taking care of their welfare. They will not be looking tattered like people who are begging on the street. And then you hear that these are teachers. We keep saying that education is the bedrock of any development in any nation. We should go check it out. And just like you mentioned, I mean, universal basic education mainly is mostly like there are some schools that run it on free education. But then it will beat your heart, even though it's free, it's not really free because parents have to pay for some things, and then before you realize it's not really free for them. So just like we're saying, I mean, I'm not surprised, because if really our lawmakers have their words attending the schools, they will know that there is no need for new ones, but to actually revamp the ones we have presently. So maybe our lawmakers have to be more deliberate and intentional about take a walk around. I mean, go to some of these federal tertiary institutions where you are representing them, and then take a look at it, and then you really know that there is need for a lot of work. So we hope that we'll see them doing just that, Rachel. Well, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Leadership newspaper. Another Leadership newspaper, protest rock Kano over appeal court judgment, with detail found on page 7. Tinubu constitute NNPCL board, retain Kiari, detailed on page 30. And on fact check, we have 4 Zamfara community deserted over bandits attack, which we saw yesterday as well. And then we're seeing Ogun offers 1 billion naira grant to 1,000 small and medium enterprises, detail found on page 2. Federal government okays 27 trillion naira for 2024 budget. Targets 18 trillion naira revenue, with detail found on page 4. Biden apologizes over comments on Gaza killings, with detail in the paper. Also, we're seeing here that gunmen killed 2 police officers and civilians in Imo State. The insecurity is becoming outrageous. We hope that the government of Imo will do something about what is happening in that state. Zenith Bank signed memorandum of understanding to establish subsidiary in France. FCTA to reclaim land occupied by hoodlums. Dangote plans listing $20 billion refinery on Nigerian stock exchange, we detailed on page 25. And the big story on the Supreme Court, Judiciary Council begins screening of the 22 justices today. With the rider exercise to last 1 week, expect full complement of justice soon coming from the Chief Justice of Nigeria. And then set the benchmark for new senior advocates. You can find more detail of that story. And we have a picture story where we can see some of the new federal permanent secretaries before the president actually taking their own pledge of allegiance to actually do their best. You can do well to grab the leadership and read more detail of this story. But before we move further with the other paper, we have said quite a lot here. And we're hoping to hear your own views about all of the story. We're seeing they have increased the budget to 27.5 trillion naira. We are projecting 18 trillion naira as a revenue, and then quite a number of things, looking at the benchmark for the crude oil, and then amidst many other things that will be captured in the 2024 budget. So we're going on that break to let you through the stories, and when we come back, we will open the phone lines and hear your views about it. Please stay tuned with us.
Make your everyday informative, make your everyday count. Know your world, daily affairs, national and international, with authentic news events as they unfold on Global News and Zuma Nigeria, Monday to Friday at 1 p.m.
Thanks for staying tuned. It's still the dailies. We have been looking at a number of stories on the paper where we've seen the president have also appointed new permanent secretaries. We're saying that by tomorrow, the president is hoping to defend the 2024 budget of about 27 trillion naira. And then quite a number of stories on the paper, insecurity in Imo State, and we're seeing the communities that have been deserted because hoodlums, and also you can say that kidnapping bandits have been disturbing them to pay a ransom of about 110 million naira, quite a huge amount of money. So we just want to hear your own views about any of the story on the paper. The number is on your screen. Please remember to turn down the volume of your TV set so we can hear you clearly, and other viewers at home can also hear you clearly as well. I still have Rachel with me in the studio. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome, Fede.
All right, before the calls come in, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Blueprint newspaper.
On Blueprint newspaper, appeal court sacks Kaduna speaker, orders rerun in 5 polling units. And in Kano State, 18 years after Grand Kadi constitutes committee to review amputation sentence. You can find more details on page 8. In Ondo State, man to die by hanging for hacking neighbor to death. More details can be found on page 18. Federal government to unveil blueprint on nationwide digital switch over coming from Malagi. More details can be found on page 14. The big story on the paper, which has been on most of our paper, at Tinubu addresses NAS on Wednesday. FEC OK's African Development Bank's $1 billion support loan for 27.50 trillion naira 2024 budget estimates. You can find details on page 6. Zenith Bank signs memorandum of understanding to establish presence in France. Tinubu retains Kyari NNPCL GCEO Nings, Obodo, and others as non-EDs. More details can be found on page 5. NALDA set to crash maize and rice prices. You can find details on page 21. And at the downside of the paper, Chief Justice of Nigeria to judges, don't succumb to mob mentality in deciding cases. Supreme Court handles 1,271 cases in 10 months, delivers 251 judgments. You can find more details on page 6, and these are the major headlines on the Blueprint newspaper.
A look at this day newspaper. Zenith Bank French government signed memorandum of understanding to establish subsidiary in France. Ariwola, unnecessary cases overstretching the judiciary. We need alternative dispute resolution mechanism. With the writer says the nation can import foreign laws to try local cases. Declare open last legal year, seek full Supreme Court bench. Consider it worthy legacy to leave behind. Federal government charges the NJC to fast-track appointment process. You can find more detail on page 10. FEC approves a 27.5 trillion naira appropriation bill for 2024. Revise the exchange rate to 750 naira to a dollar. Oil benchmark now $77.96. OK's $1 billion African Development Bank considering loan. Oyedele leads the tax reform committee, briefs FEC. Council approved Nigerian draft human rights report to the UN. Tinubu present the 2024 appropriation bill to National Assembly tomorrow. And then Abbas, which is the speaker, we will give Nigerians avenue to participate in the budget process. You can find more in the paper. We have the pictures where we are seeing the memorandum of understanding with the French government, and that's all on this day newspaper.
On New Telegraph newspaper, we have a report that says Nigeria records $33.27 billion forex inflow in the first half of 2023. And on recapitalization, Tier 2 banks to face more challenges. You can find more details on page 25. Tinubu retains carry as NNPCL GCEO. Appeal court rulings may lead to anarchy, a statement coming from Bode George. Stranded Abuja passengers protest flight cancellations. And on offshore subsidiaries, Zenith Bank signs memorandum of understanding with French government. You can find details on page 8. And then the big story on the paper is why Buhari's Nigeria end won't work as conceived by the federal government. FEC raises 2024 budget proposal by 1.5 trillion naira, pegs dollar at 750 naira, crude oil at $77 per barrel. OK's $1 billion African Development Bank budget support loan. Tinubu presents 26 trillion naira 2024 and budget, rather 27 trillion naira 2024 budget to the National Assembly tomorrow. However, Sele, quickly, I do have a concern with the why Buhari's Nigeria air won't work as conceived by the federal government. And then the question is it a Buhari's Nigeria air or is it a Nigerian air? Because the point between this airline, I believe that this is one of the struggle we have, that there's no continuity when it comes to development. It's like administrations come and go, and then no matter how good a project started by a previous administration is, they dump it, making it look as if it is an administration project rather than a Nigerian project. Now, if we are to have Nigerian air functional, it reduces capitalization when it comes to the current aviation system, because whether we like it or not, we are seeing that we are having a backlog, that airlines may soon start boycotting Nigeria. Exactly. Now, it means that some of these fundings will not only go to these private airlines, but Nigeria will also be a partaker directly, the federal government, to the revenue generated from aviation, not just taxes, not the levies that these airlines are supposed to remit to us, but we will not be having direct revenue when it comes to Nigerian Air. So rather than a statement as why Buhari is Nigerian Air, why won't the federal government just say it won't work as conceived? It's not a president's project. That administration must have started it, but it is a Nigerian project. And I just hope that with this statement, because usually when such what will I call it, when a project is starting to be tagged in a certain way, giving it a name to somebody, there's mostly going to be an abandonment of that project. And I am looking forward to nothing like that happening, because billions of naira have been sunk into this Nigerian Air project precisely, and it is a good project. It's not a Buhari's project, it is a Nigeria project, and it will be good for us to have a Nigerian Air. We have Ethiopian Air, we have Qatar Airways, we have all these airways owned by countries, by a government, making tons of revenue on us, and yet we don't see the need for ours to thrive as it should be. So I just hope that the federal government doesn't abandon this project. It shouldn't be tagged Buhari's project, but rather a Nigerian project eventually. And you can find details of these stories on page 2 and 3. Still on New Telegraph newspaper, we have Obasanjo's Progress Group. Coups in Africa, sign of failed Western liberal democracy. And the writer under the story says, support Africa to enthrone accountable leadership, Obi tells Commonwealth leaders. Rep begin COVID-19 funds misuse probe. You can find details on page 4. And in Edo 2024, nobody can stop my ambition, says Shaibu. And we have Tantita Security vows to stamp out crude oil theft, and we have coal-fire business in the Niger Delta. More details can be found on page 2. And at the downside of the paper, we have a study that says coal power plant pollution deadly. You can find details on page 26, and that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
I don't know how our former president can be convinced that democracy is not the problem. We've said this countless times. We will keep saying it, and we will repeat it even tomorrow again when we see things like this. That democracy is not the problem. The problem here right now are the drivers of the democracy. They have failed to actually follow the do's and don'ts of democracy. If you really want to practice the civilian way of government, then you have to play to the latter. You don't pick what suits you and leave others that doesn't know. You embrace everything together, and I think that is the problem we're having in this country. And we can link it with your big story as well, Rachel, where we'll have an administration coming and abandoning the formal work and feel like, I mean, anybody that is a stranger in this government is who will actually know that, okay, if somebody start, another person cuts you. Over the years, we've seen that that has been the problem, not just in the federal level, down to even the local government. Once I start a project and then another person comes, and especially we don't agree on certain things, my project is being abandoned and then another person's project is being picked, or you feel another project that is of top priority. But I just believe that we need to come to an understanding that things are not working. Why? Because we do not have leaders that actually see the need to make it work in the first place. I mean, are other countries not practicing democracy? Why are they not complaining about it? Is this coming because we're having another attempted coup in Sierra Leone? And African leaders know the way forward. So I'm expecting to see African leaders coming together to see where are we getting it wrong and how can we make it right. And one thing is always a problem: corruption, bad governance. When we have a lot of people feeling that it's about me, my family, and my loved ones, and nobody else matter. Where we see that the rule of man is what is driving, not the rule of law. Here we are seeing even our Chief Justice is talking about let the Supreme Court or the justice over there should rule by competence and not by emotions. But we've seen emotions that play over the years. So I'm hoping to see when we say that democracy is not working, I need the former president to come and tell us why. I mean, you were one time a military head of state, and you are also the president. How comes it working your time, and right now it's not working? How did you get it right? Why don't you share your experience of knowledge with the leaders presently, and maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to see things thriving and working well better. So, Richard, our fingers are crossed, and we hope we'll see things better as it goes. Well, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Nation newspaper. And this is coming from the Deputy Governor of Edo State, Shaibu. He said, I'm intimidated. My allocation cease. Here he's talking about the governor joins the 2024 race. That's the deputy governor is joining the 2024 race. Supreme Court will get full 21 justices. Ariwola pledges reduces cases at the apex court. We did 90 kilometers of roads in 1 year, says the Ocean government. Adeleke on holiday in Thailand. You can find more of that on page 5. Union buying the least shares from the NGX, and then also here we're seeing National Assembly under pressure over the 2024 budget. President to present a 27.5 trillion naira appropriation bill tomorrow. Tinubu orders massive fixing of federal roads. Report bad roads via dedicated phone lines. You can find more detail of that story in the paper. Also here we're seeing that Akero Dolu Ayediwa peace agreement heads for collapse. Deputy Governor loyalists pushing lawmakers to make him the acting governor. I stand on Abuja deal. Speaker insists. You can find more detail of the story in the paper. Banks ready for recapitalization. You can find that in the paper. Nigerian Air Project for review. You can find that also on page 11. We have two picture story where we can see the governor of Lagos State also there in Benin, and then also we're seeing something about the globe, talking about partnership. You can do well to grab the nation, read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Teen Trust newspaper, Access Bank donates tables, chairs to Kano Public School. The big story on the paper, Loyola Joseph College wins ACCA competition, receives 2 million naira cash prize. GSS Eket African Church School wins NSS FFL. You can start with the details on the front page. Then we have columns on page 7 for lifestyle, page 5 career, and then page 14 well-being, and then page 10 short stories. And that's all the news on Teen Trust newspaper.
Let's take a look at the Business Day newspaper. Japa wave empties construction sites. You can find more of that. We've seen that a lot of places right now affected by the issue of the Japa. Nigerians stand aloof as the world runs to cutting climate change. You can find more of that on page 2. And we are really experiencing the climate change, where we saw that there was rain in some parts of the country in the last 2 days or so. So we can actually check how this climate change will affect us and what we need to do. NNPC moves again to break petrol import jerks. You can find that on page 50. Subsidy removal pushes transport industry into recession. Zenith Bank signed deal to set up subsidiary in France. Manufacturers credit sale jump amid weak demand. You can find more of that on page 31. We have a picture story on the front page as well. You can do well to grab the Business Day and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you.
On Punch Sport Extra, Gent coach wants more from Orban. Osimhen keen on Chelsea move, and then we have Parisians face Magpies in group of death. This is Paris Saint-Germain versus Newcastle. Then we have Milan versus Dortmund. We have Rossoneri target back-to-back wins. Ashola make CAF Award final shortlist. And then we have Oshoba thrilled after Igbo title win. And then we have Garnacho reveals in stunning overhead kick. Chelsea won't sack Pochettino. The big story is Percy go. And we have NFF considering replacing Eagles coach with local gaffer after team's poor start to World Cup qualifiers. And at the downside of the paper, Confed Cup Rivers not under pressure. Saka admits difficult EPL marking. You can find more details on page 4. We also have Man City versus Leipzig, first battle, second in Group G. And that's all the news on Punch Sports Extra.
Well, I think that's how far we can go on the program this morning. Thank you, Rachel, for doing this with me. And thank you also to our viewers and supporters for always keeping a date with us on the program, the Dailies. Until we come again, we have a blessed year ahead.